Thank you all for coming to the Women in FinOps event. Just real quick reminder of the code of conduct. So be respectful, making sure we're being inclusive of other people and no sales pitch. So if you are like a vendor consultant that are on here, not reaching out to anybody post this call. Agenda today, we have a speaker, and then I'll talk to you about ways to get involved. And then I'm actually, we typically don't get to breakouts, but I'm going to talk a little bit about FinOps X, and like love to hear if you all are interested in speaking, and just do kind of a Q&A on that, just kind of set some perspective of what that will be about. So jumping right in, hopefully many of you all know Dina Solis. She's been part of the community for a few years now. I want to start by kind of just giving an introduction. One thing I love about Dina is she has always been, in my opinion, outspoken, and she, challenges things and pushes us in the foundation, which I love. But then when you talk to her, she'll say, I'm an introvert. And so I've never felt that way about her in the community. And one of my biggest moments with Dina was last year when we were at FinOps X, and she was on the stage of the keynote, and she said in the middle of it, I'm nervous, and did a big breath. And I was backstage getting ready to go on next. And it gave me a big chuckle, and it kind of calmed my nerves. And so I love how authentic Dina is, and I think we need more of that in the community. So I just want to kind of give that Dina story. Dina, why don't you start and just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you work today?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Ashley and Stacy and everyone at FinOps Foundation for just continuing to support this series, this group, this purpose. I am a senior FinOps engineer at Smarsh, and if you're not familiar with them, they are a company that is, I always just say data archiving, but I read their LinkedIn today, and it says that we are a company that enables organizations to recognize the value and manage risk within their own communications data. And that's kind of FinOps too, right? So we're constantly, I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be, which is a great feeling. I'm an individual contributor. I've come here on a path of having been a people manager and team lead, and someone who has had interim title after battlefield promotion after such and such. And I found that FinOps was not a thing that I sought out as a career goal. It was just a thing that found me. It was a thing that fit very comfortably in terms of I saw problems that were not new. They were just in a new context, which was cloud infrastructure. But we've never not had problems extracting the value from technology and making it what we want it to be from a business organization or business standpoint, from an organization objective. And I came from healthcare IT, so anyway, I draw a lot of my old data center experience, a lot of my old sort of change management experience into all of my talks and all of my projects within the FinOps space. Haven't always called it that, but I'm happy to have a shorthand sort of name for what I do.
And Dina, you talked to me about a topic that you're really passionate about is humanizing FinOps. Can you describe what that means and how you practice that?
I will say that I borrow that phrase. So humanizing FinOps is something that I'm just going to start saying this year. I borrow the phrase humanizing tech from the name of a podcast, because I love podcasts, that is made by a group where I volunteer, Portland Women in Technology, or PDX-WIT. And there's a story behind that name. They used to call it something else, involving glass ceilings. And they renamed it around the same time that they were revising their mission statement. And they had realized as a community, we had realized as a community that we were probably overemphasizing the identity of women to the erasure of all of our non-binary and gender fluid members who were a really important part of building the community. And we recognized that there was harm being done in our inaction And so their mission statement changed, and the name of the podcast changed along with it to Humanizing Tech. And so to me, humanizing is always a process of unlearning habits and dismantling systems that diminish the humanity of anyone else who's not being represented. If we're not thinking of them as full humans, then we're not doing our job. And until we do that, we can't really talk about breaking barriers or ceilings of all materials, or advancing careers, because we haven't recognized our own privilege. We haven't used our platforms for the power that it gives us. And so it's uncomfortable because it's always a little bit risky. So I can say it a little bit more fully in groups like this, but just know when I'm not saying it, I'm thinking I need to humanize FinOps.
I love, I think that's something we should kind of keep refining a little bit too, and how to do that. Take us back a little bit on your career journey. I loved hearing your history. Like many of us, didn't necessarily go to school to do FinOps. So where did you start out at?
So I grew up in Southern California. I went to public school from K through 12 and went to 3 public universities in 3 different states. Started out electrical engineering at Cal Poly Pomona. Ended up taking a break and selling computers for a living. Computers, software, small office hardware for Circuit City and the good guys. And I loved consumer electronics. It was fun. There was always something new to learn. It challenged the heck out of me. It brought me out of my introvert comfort zone. It forced me to have a plan of what to say, so that I could keep talking and no one would notice my voice shaking. And I could do what I was doing in order to help people solve problems. I mean, that's sort of where I started. I think I read something in your description that I started out not liking computers. I was avoiding computers anyway. So that was true. But that was in the 90s. And then I did go back. I finished my bachelor's degree, but most of my credits were in social sciences, humanities, and that's the degree I ended up getting. Emphasis in English because that's just where the credits transferred. I decided after that I would probably try to do some tech writing because I had read a lot of manuals, and I had done a lot of customer service and electronics, and hello, English majors, and I wanted to help companies write better manuals because a lot of the manuals I was reading were very bad, and I wanted to help. And it was a problem that I saw. What ended up happening was jobs kept presenting themselves to me in help desks and tech service providers. And so I started working desktop support and started getting certifications and things like that. And it was a really forward moving, steady paced career for every age I was. I was kind of smashing all of my expectations of, well, in order to make a living wage, you need to have a college degree. I was proving to myself and to my parents that, no, actually, with or without a degree, I know that I can find, some way to work hard and still be able to support myself, that sort of thing. And I could find a way into technology, largely because it wasn't my expectation that I get into technology. It was just a job that recognized my skills, communications, technical writing, and just an enthusiasm for technology. And then I spent about 9 years that sort of meandering path of temp jobs in help desks, and call centers led me to healthcare, where IT was transforming clinical processes from paper to digital. And it was an exciting time to be there, and also a very chaotic time to be there, because of so many changes at once. Well, it's how I learned to manage change, and not from a technical sense, not from an ITIL sense, but from a sense of people, and that all of the resistance that we have to change is entirely human. It should be expected, and we should figure out better ways to help people accept change instead of a sort of, what do they call that? Culling, when reduction in force happens and anyone who can't change with the company is just reduced. There's a there are things that I got to see both as a team lead and as a manager of people that, I mean, it'll never, I can never unsee that, the way people were treated. And it sort of informs me in every job I do, and in every employer who I'm willing to work for. So I'm not willing to work for a company that doesn't take responsibility for how it treats humans. So
it's interesting. Sometimes you have to see what you don't want to see. Like even with managers, you have to have a manager that you don't want to have to know how you want to be a manager, right? And same thing in companies, you go through that experience. And I don't know if folks on the call have been through this, but there's a lot of layoffs happening right now and things like that. And I've had some people that I've previously worked with kind of reaching out, and it's like, you're not going to stop the train from coming, but like figure out how you can control the situation by, if layoffs are coming and they keep talking about it for months and months, get ahead of that, right? And so I think, Dina, that's one thing you and I talked about, is like, even through you being a leader and you kind of get the other perspective on how to handle situations.
oh my gosh, yeah, I was at a gathering just recently that someone had asked the question, well, how do you deal um, with layoffs right now? How do you compete when there's so many people on the market? How do you and those are all really good questions to ask. They're problems to solve. Like the immediate problem is, what if my paycheck stops at this point? What do I do? But there are also questions that you can ask yourself to prepare for that. So I was laid off in 2014. It was after a period of IT outsourcing. I had been in healthcare IT for about 9 years at that point. And I call it, if you look at my, it's been out there for years on my LinkedIn profile, I call it my 10-month sabbatical, my much needed sabbatical. And I did spend that 10 months. It was a great time. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. I cannot emphasize enough that I could have looked at it lots of different ways. I could have looked at it as those people who were there, who advanced into those roles, I trained that person, I should have that job. That's so practiced because I did think it at one time or another. And I could have kept thinking in the same way, or my other option, my other choice was to think, well, what does this open up for me? And how can I use this as a sabbatical? And why would I want to work for a company that demands more hours than they're paying for, that doesn't give raises, that doesn't recognize the value of certain teams over others, just because one team might be making, having more of a revenue impact than another? Business doesn't get done unless both teams show up. And that is, I mean, to me, those things are obvious, but it's not always a thing that is obvious to decision makers, or that decision makers are willing to admit. And I think that that's, that when we talk about layoffs that are happening right now, It's not that we can't do our part to prepare for them, to upskill and to understand more things about the economy and why they happen in some industries and some companies than others. But it's also a good reminder that for me, one of the reasons that I was able to enjoy it for what it was, to take advantage of that time that I was able to get a bunch of cloud certifications and just extra learning at the time, was because I went into it knowing, recognizing the deficiencies of my leadership and knowing, oh man, I don't know if you've worked with me in the past in healthcare. I worked with some great leaders, some great mentors, but also we were working under some really faulty assumptions that our economy was going to stay a certain way. And we ignored a lot of unsustainable behaviors, both business and kind of mental, emotional relationships. And they were just unsustainable leadership behaviors. We witnessed those things. And so for me, I saw it coming. I knew I had to get very healthy. And part of that health was my mental health and being prepared for it, my physical health, and getting moving. And I think I had been a smoker at that time, so I'd quit smoking. I also got very financially healthy. And frankly, a lot of the practices that I was doing already as a delivery manager for infrastructure services, I mean, I knew how to keep a tight budget. I knew how to balance books. I knew how to count money coming in and money going out. And I had to think of it as a way, as a thing, a healthy behavior that I had to do for myself. And so that was part of it too. That sort of recognition that the economy is something that we don't have control over, but the more prepared we are to weather it, the more financially healthy and emotionally healthy, and the more we understand our own self-worth, the more we're going to be prepared for it. And you know, yeah.
I want to dig into something because you're talking about financial, and you and I had a conversation about how I know companies don't do this, but there are some areas where salary being transparent. And you said this quote, I'm going to put it in the chat if you don't mind, because it was something that really stuck with me, which is you said there was periods throughout your career where you were making a little more than what you needed. And I think that's such an interesting way that you phrase that, because I've been there. My parents had both had blue collar jobs, and so when I was making more than what my dad had made at a job for 30 years, it's I made it, right? And you think based on your diverse background and how you come up, you're you didn't per se have people that were telling you this is what you should be making, or this is what your value and your worth is, and you got to have kind of learn that throughout the process. And the fact that you said I was good, I was making a little more than what I needed, I thought that was interesting. I really wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit more, and how that pivoted to where you did start negotiating and figuring out where you should be compensated.
Oh my gosh, it's all related. It is all related because, so many of us leave school at whatever level. We might be at the top of our class. A lot of people in this call were probably at some point at the top of their class for something. And then at some point found that they were having to work harder in high heels and backwards than a lot of their counterparts. And why is that? Gosh, I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that there was still a lot of inequality for my gender or any other of my identities, because I happened to be in healthcare. I'm the daughter of Filipino immigrants, by the way. And if you don't know this, there was a period in American history where they I think it was the military that trained a lot of Filipino nurses and basically exported them around the world. So in healthcare, you might notice that there's an overrepresentation of Filipino nurses. I was never one, but as an IT provider in hospitals, I was able to see myself represented at many different levels, many diverse levels, leadership and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I thought things were fine. A lot of women in leadership because a lot of nurses. Healthcare was just cool that way. Of course, never in the CIO position, but that's another story. What I will say is that because I had a pretty good forward progressing career, and I was always, like I said, I was very conscious of living within my means. And by the way, not always, but at a certain point after I learned the hard way, learned to live within my means without debt, that sort of thing. I did find that once I was in technology, that I was always exceeding my budget. I was able to start, slowly putting things right financially and saving for future me, retired me. And so because of that, I didn't have any kind of urgency to network with women's groups, to network with, well, I mean, we didn't call it BIPOC, but if you identify as someone who's Black, Indigenous, or person of color, there are just certain things that when you don't see yourself represented, when you don't see others like you, when you don't see other people who have in some way been marginalized, you might just think that you might get the wrong signal that maybe the only reason I'm here is because I was willing to work hard. Well, there's a whole lot of other circumstances that you learn when you can be in community, that you can, compare shared experiences. And well, up to a certain point in my career, I was very focused on just maturing and being able to take care of myself. And so for that reason, I didn't have that urgency. Something changed when I was working in a large shoe and apparel company. And I looked around and I saw that, so I had been pulled out of healthcare after I was laid off. And it was tough for me to get a leadership position, a manager title. And what I remember was this. As comfortable as I was, I didn't have those constant reminders like I did until I got there, which was I could look around in any room I was in and not see other people like me. And here was a company with a great culture, with a very inclusive mission, and with a lot of healthy processes and structure in place to create that kind of culture of belonging. And still, if you were in engineering, there was one of you on each team. And it reminded me of when I was in Little League. I played against my sister's Little League baseball team for a couple of years. She was the only girl on her team. I was the only girl on my team. There were two other teams that each had a girl on them. And we thought everything was fine because they let these teams be co-ed, and they didn't used to be. I'm only a little bit older than Title IX. So for that reason, again, I just thought, well, progress, small steps. We're making progress. But I look around now and I see evidence that we haven't made enough progress. It still doesn't look like the world looks, like our communities actually look. We're not valuing each other for all of our humanity. We're valuing each other for these traits that we pick out, like who's the most outgoing, who is the who is the most charismatic, not necessarily who is working the hardest or maybe just showing up. We never know what's going on for other people, and yeah, I think one of the things that prevents us from acting is this sense that, oh, everything's fine. You know, I'm making a little more than I need. I'm pretty comfortable. And I know that I was always kind of bringing up the rear. So if I'm comfortable, everyone else must be knocking it out of the park. But that wasn't the case at all. It never occurred to me that there were a lot of other people who wanted to get where I was, and that would represent a lot more progress. And I wasn't doing my part to hold the door open. I wasn't doing my part to it's when I started mentoring with Portland Women in Tech. It's when I started trying to do the things in the community that I thought would make it a little bit more sustainable. And then I also realized that as I was doing that work, the data was very clear that I was being paid a lot less. All of the employers, and there were a bunch of them, who told us not to talk about what we were being paid. It turns out that a lot of people just ignore that rule. And I'm such a rule follower that if someone told me not to discuss my hourly rate, I would never. But it turned out that all you had to do was ask, and really, or just all you had to learn to play foosball, and you would get all kinds of information from your coworkers about what they were making and what they were doing with their money. And you realize, wait a minute, I bring that amount of skill, I bring that amount of effort, and I have some other things. I have some experience, I have some integrity, I have some perspective that actually, why am I not being paid more? Not that I need more money, but what does it say about who we are how we align our values with our actions? Like I said, I can't go back and say and I wouldn't go back and try to negotiate every salary or every rate I ever contracted at. However, if you want to know how, I'll teach you. I'll teach you what I've learned. Because I don't think it's enough. Yeah, I don't think it's enough. And we should be thinking about it not just for what we need, but also for what it does for everyone when we all value ourselves and understand, what kind of what we're leaving on the table, what we're not improving by accepting being undervalued.
I remember, Dina, the first time I got a raise and I went home and I told my dad, he's like, I think you're worth more. And I was so mad at him for saying that because I was just so proud of myself. And all I wanted him to say was good job. But now looking back, it was like, no, he was like trying to tell me like, you should have negotiated more, or, actually what you're doing is more valuable. And like, that's just an interesting, like, reflection of, as that's why I loved the thing that you said so much is like, I'm good, I'm making enough. Like, I don't need to push it any further, but you're pushing it for the next person behind you. And I think that's a kind of a key thing too. I do want to talk a little bit about something else that you mentioned to me, which is you kind of avoided DEI for a while or getting into those conversations. And then you had a pivotal moment. Can you talk about what that was?
So, a friend of mine reminded me that I never avoided DEI. In 1999, I was a multicultural club president. at Washington State University, and I still have that on an old copy of my resume. um, so, all right, what is it? So actually, I learned probably in high school and college that talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, that's how we put it together today. I add justice in there and belonging, as many of us do. But at the time, I think we called it two things, either multiculturalism or diversity. And it was just a recognition that there's not just one culture. And so many of us are having to, I love the term code switch, because some of us are learning to code, but we're also like code switching, even just between my parents and my cousins. We have different languages that we're allowed to use in one room versus another. And then you take that to a professional level, and you have to bring a certain part of yourself. So much of that comes very natural to me because I've been doing that sort of context switching all of my life as a daughter of immigrants and as the youngest and as someone who's learned from older siblings on what not to do. There are lots of things that oh gosh, Ashley, bring me back.
Just you mentioned about DEI and like you kind of like not
Yeah,
necessarily it, but you're
thank
like
you.
I'm whatever. And then there was a pivotal moment for you, and I think this is interesting.
That was it. So the thing about DEI was that I learned at a very young age that if I talked about it too much, it made a lot of people uncomfortable. And my ability to be recognized for my achievements depended a lot on me not making other people uncomfortable. And so now at my point in my career, I'm 51, by the way, and I'm pretty dang proud of that. I have had a lot of time to build my own security. So it is okay if you don't feel the same way about making other people uncomfortable who might control your destiny or your paycheck at least. That's okay. Don't make everybody uncomfortable. I learned how to not make my boss or my coworkers or the guys on my baseball team uncomfortable. I let them, I blended in. I was one of the guys. And so not talking about DEI was definitely a survival mechanism. Not talking about why I was different was survival for me. And it was just important for me to protect my own safety a lot of the time. It gave me a lot of, it was strategic. It was a strategic decision to give me a lot of access. And when we talk about, oh man, I walk into a lot of rooms where people want to talk about DEI, and then they ask me what I think, and I'm expected to explain the whole thing, just from the history of diversity. There's no way to do that, but I'm always glad that people want to have the conversation, but it was an entire degree track. By the way, most of the people that I know who graduated with social science degrees made half coming out of college than my other friends who had engineering degrees or medical or whatever other highly valued career tracks. Did it make them better humans? Did it make them less important in the community? Was overvaluing only engineers and doctors and lawyers sustainable for any kind of community that we live in, any kind of organization that does business? No, that's not what an economy is. We're all connected. And I mean, understanding that about the economy is just like, it's another way that FinOps kind of just echoes my understanding of how we all need to recognize who we're working with, what our strengths are, find ways to collaborate even when we have different goals. We have to find our common ground, and and when we do that in FinOps, we make our companies better. If we're, consulting, we make our clients stronger. There's so many things that we can do just by humanizing FinOps that if we like transferred that out to just the way that we do economies, and we would just be in such a more sustainable economy, and we wouldn't be looking at so many fluctuations, so many things that we can't control. And I've been talking for a long time.
I do have one more question for you, then I got a couple people poking me, want to ask you questions. So one more for you, which is, you've gone to meetups, and I want to just like kind of address this. Like, how do you handle, like, I'm in the COVID mode where like I barely leave my house, right? And so how do you handle going outside of COVID, going back into these meetups, and going into a meetup and just like meeting other people and networking? Like, because you and I have talked about how, you feel like you're more of an introvert. Like, what's your tips for like go to a meetup, and how do you be strategic as a practitioner at one of these meetups?
Yeah, so I'll just mention the introvert part of it first, which is that as much as I avoid it, every time I go to a meetup that is important to me, where I'm able to connect with like-minded community, especially when I don't have that in my day-to-day, I'm always glad that I did it. Afterwards, I'm always glad that I went out and made those connections, and some lasting, and some I've found mentorship and those kinds of relationships from that I wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. And so what I would say to anyone who is not put themselves out there is that there are virtual meetups, and you've got to know what your level of safety needs to be for you. And so here we are at one of them, but we were at one recently in person, and it is, I think, the best thing to do is always just know what your boundaries need to be for you to be comfortable, and let people know what those boundaries are. So when you see them walking towards you and you don't want to hug, I've had to do this with my close friends. I'm not hugging. And largely, like if I'm going to go travel to see my mom, I'm especially careful that week, or the weeks leading up to that travel. And I mean, the precautions, we know we can take precautions, and so those things are definitely there. But then I also say, meetups are practice. They're networking practice. They are things that we need to do if we are if we're looking for opportunities. We can't wait for them to come to us. We have to be the ones who attract them to us, and we have to be the ones who are very, clear on why we're actually there. And sometimes that purpose is purely connection. It may not be because I've got a sales goal, or I've got a recruitment goal, or it may not be for a business related goal. It may just be for a connection. And I encourage you to do it, and to ask us. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that helps a lot. Look, everything you just said, because it's you forget how valuable the network. And I think sometimes repetition is key. Like, it's like anything. Like, the first time you speak, you're more nervous, and you build it up, and then I think the same thing with meetups is that those first couple times they're going to be uneasy, and then you'll be a natural, and you'll have people that you're clicking with and stuff. I do want to open up to everyone. We have about 15 minutes. So any questions for Dina? I know we covered some topics from DEI to salary, career journey, layoffs. So anything you all want to ask her?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so like going back to you just talking about, representing your worth and things like that. I get in performance reviews, you're triggered to talk about how much value we bring to the company, but how do you make sure you're doing that continuously and not losing sight of all the value you're bringing to the table if you're at a company for a longer time? And I think it's important, especially when it comes to raises, but also like opportunities that you might potentially be missing out on, like even if it's not right under your direct manager, like if there's other opportunities in the organization that might be a better fit, if it's like, you know, you're wanting to be a manager and right now you're an individual contributor, like how do you continuously represent your value and remind yourself of your value throughout your career?
So weirdly, I think I learned this in retail. And actually, retail is a really fast feedback loop, especially if you're commission based. You either know you are doing these, you're following the successful behaviors, or you're not. And as a sales manager and training my team, I also knew if like we as an organization were succeeding, and we're in that context. Is where I learned to do fast 360-degree feedback. I don't think we called it that then, but that's basically where you ask the person who you're evaluating their performance, what they think of their performance, you're evaluating it, and you're asking their peers or stakeholders what their evaluations are for those things. What you ask for is going to vary by the context that you're in and what you value as how you define successful behaviors. I mean, in a sales context, it's pretty cut and dry. Like if things are selling and not being returned, by the way, so you couldn't get away with the shortcuts that would just lead to buyer's remorse and things like that. So there were some sort of more healthy behaviors built into those evaluations. It was always really fast feedback, and we would do it. We're reviewing numbers all the time, so monthly, quarterly, and some of us even now are in financial institutions or SaaS companies or other high growth areas where we are measuring things on performance. And if you don't have a manager who is helping you with that performance and evaluation for you to develop, there's nothing stopping you from asking for that feedback from, even if you're not getting it from your own manager, maybe there's other managers in your company who have an expectation of what you would need to grow. And by the way, they don't all have the right answers. But funny thing about when you ask for feedback, you are already demonstrating a behavior of success, and that's that you want self-awareness, you want to learn, and you're making that effort without being forced to, but just because you're motivated and internally to improve yourself. You're not going to have any problem with this, Sierra, because you're already asking the right question. But it's a thing that where we think that we have to be led onto that ramp by someone who knows more, who makes more, and who has a bigger title. But actually, no, I mean, you know if you're making enough for yourself, you know if you're hitting your goals, you know if you are doing the job that you set out to do. And if you collect that feedback from others, you're demonstrating some really good behaviors too. I got my MBA in 2008 because I thought that in the healthcare industry, where everything was so hierarchical, if you weren't a doctor, the chief of nursing was a doctor of nursing. He had his PhD in nursing. And it was kind of, you could tell how important it was to have a lot of letters after your name. I stopped doing that when I left healthcare. I was happy to not have any kind of letters after my name. I put them on my LinkedIn kind of as a joke. And while I was in the process, I think I was in my second semester, I got offered the job that I thought required the degree that I was going for. I think it was master's in technology management at the time. I ended up sort of leveraging, finding a loophole that my company would pay for an MBA. Um, and so I switched to that so that they would pay for more of my units. But my point is, I thought that there was a gate and that it was locked tight. And until I had a master of something, that I would not be able to advance into a manager role. It was handed to me as soon as I let people know that I was in the program. The rest of my work spoke for me. My ability to collaborate and keep learning, I think spoke for me. And the fact that a lot of these jobs are tough. Nobody wants them.
And I think add to that, Dina, too, being in a manager role, when you look to go into manager and above role, it's not just your manager making that decision. I think it's really important. Your manager puts that forward for you, but typically there is a collection of people that are giving that feedback. And so that's why I love FinOps, is because you get to be interacting with a CTO, a CIO, a VP of finance. And so like going back to humanizing FinOps, it's all about working with other people and really, I would say being helpful, being valuable, because a lot of those decisions are not just a single manager. When you progress in your career, they're asked the input of the person to the left, the person to the right, the person below. And so it's just important to like keep those relationships. Someone said this, and I don't know if it was in this Women in FinOps thing or some other time, but someone said, save all the compliments that you get. And I really like that idea, because it will help you, even if you just don't read them all, but just like, okay, there's a list. I am doing good things, and no, get that doubt away. But I do like that idea of like, especially on your hard days, like looking and being like, oh, I am good at my job. Look at these people that have given these positive compliments, and like kind of having that. And I bet a lot of the things that you get compliments on, they're things that you're probably scared to do anyways, or you're not sure if you're very confident in it. And then you get that feedback and you're like, I can do hard things and do it well. So just add on to what Dina said there.
Well, that's
Michelle,
awesome.
if you haven't been looking at the chat, Michelle also posted a great resource. And I think, what else did I miss in there? Yeah, thanks for adding that. You're not on camera, so you're probably multitasking.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too. I noticed as a manager, when I would have my one-on-ones with, also, if you're not having a one-on-one with your manager, schedule it yourself too. Don't let that go by not having a one-on-one. But I would find constantly, and I don't know if this is like, I can't say this is fully true, but a lot of times when I have meetings with people that are reporting to me that were males, they would always bring up how am I doing performance, like how am I tracking, always. And when I would have meetings with some of the women, it was always about the task and the work. It was like, I did this, I checked this off, I'm completed here. It was always a status update. And so I thought that was just an interesting dynamic, is that the males that reported to me tended to be continuing to keep that on the top of my mind, because they would repetitively bring it up in one-on-ones. And I think that's something as women, we're a little bit like, if I do a good job, you'll see that I'm doing a good job. You'll promote me. I don't need to keep reoccurring, bringing this up to you. You do need to nudge. Not every meeting, right? Not every one-on-one, but you do need to do things like, hey, next time we have a one-on-one, I'd really like to talk about my career progression. Next time we have a one-on-one, I would really like to see what the job description looks like for the position above mine, so I can be working towards it. Like, don't like scare your manager by saying that in the middle of a meeting. Like, tell them ahead of time that that's what you want to talk about, but you do need to be bringing it up with them.
So in my more cynical years, or actually like an hour ago, I had a,
Cynical of the year, hour ago, Dina.
I mean, at an undisclosed point in time in my past, I've had someone approach me and say, that they were setting goals to increase their portfolio to a certain whatever. And I thought, oh man, that's great. And before they could say it, and they did actually say, like, recognize that they had a lot to learn. In my mind, I was like, maybe you could just learn the stuff you've got right now first before you could start. It's not to say that we shouldn't be setting our goals and looking at our horizon, but we should be very clear on what our near-term and what our long-term goals are and what reality is. Not because not because we want to start limiting ourselves, but just so that we can be honest with ourselves. I wish that there were more, I wish that there were more opportunities to go back and say to a couple of my counterparts that, no, you're not ready for management. But I'm glad that I didn't. Because they got to be my experiment. I had to watch if I was right. Were they ready? Nope, turns out they weren't, but I'm glad it was them. Everything that we do in a career is we're taking a chance. And just because we're kind of short on time, I always want to bring it back to the fact that we have our own internal biases that are always talking to us already, that hold us back. And for me, when I was I was a field engineer. I think it was like wiring network closets at that time. And I remember being offered a spot on a particular team that was really high profile. And I thought, and I had just gotten pregnant, and I didn't want to take the role knowing that in a few months, I wouldn't be able to show up 100%. It turns out nobody is ever showing up 100% all the time. And if they are, take them aside, make sure they're taking care of themselves. Because no, the reality is that we're all making sacrifices all the time. And the fact that I was going to be willing to prioritize my health, my pregnancy, my family, should not have removed me from consideration from that team. It didn't. I got that role eventually, but I was limiting myself because my own biases, because I never make a career decision without being reminded that I have reproductive organs. And it's just one of those things that, yeah, it does make us different. And we do talk about it because we don't get to not think about it. We don't get to not go to the bathroom and expect to see tampons being provided by our employer. By the way, if you go into an office and your employer's not providing them, you should probably suggest it to HR. They'll do it. It's an easy thing to take care of all of your valued employees if you actually do value them. There are things that we do. I like to bring those up just because we're working just as hard to learn how to do cost optimization, working just as hard to learn how to do data visualization, understanding that technology, I can do the git commits, I can do the infrastructure as code if I have to. And actually, if I were at a different point in my career, I would probably prefer to do that than all of the other stuff that I do with decision makers. But all that to say that there's so much more that if we're not talking about what we are dealing with internally and externally, then we're not really letting our employers, our industries know that they're not doing enough to even the playing field. They're not doing enough to hold the doors open, to value everyone for making the whole company work better.
I love that, Dina. I know we're a little bit of time, so I do want to thank you so much for doing this. I didn't get to talk about FinOps X, but I just want to, tell everybody that we are still looking for speakers. DM me on one-on-one if you're like, I think I have an idea. I'll talk about it with you and we can build it up. The talks are 25 minutes and then 5 minutes of Q&A. They're recorded. We do speaker preps. You get a template. We just need to bring the content and speak at it. So if there's any part of you that's itching to do it, let us know. It's open for another month and a half. So I know, Michelle, you and I have been pinging this today. So
yeah, for the panel, and I'll send that. I got to reach out to Eric. Are you guys still doing lightning talks?
It's not it's to be determined. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that in our ambassador meeting, so I figured I'd ask you that. But yeah,
I mean, so far JR hasn't said we're doing a day 3, so we'll see. No, to be determined. But thank you, Dina, so much for this, and everyone for joining us and listening to our story and all the good feedback. And if you want to speak at one of these, let Vic or I know as well. We've got 2 more speakers lined up, and then after that, we're going to be looking for some more. So. Thank you all.
If you want to speak at X and you don't feel like you can, talk to Ashley or myself. We will cheerlead you, coach you, and support you in any way we can, because all of you on here pretty much should be speaking at X.
I have a quick question.
Free ticket.
I have a quick question. When does the deadline close for that submission?
February 28th. So we got a little bit still, but.
Okay.
We can help you, Ashley. And when I say we, it's the universal we of Ashley. Can help you like go from thought to like amazing detail.
And they really help with PowerPoint slides, because I had to help. They helped me last year when I did my lightning talk. So there's a lot of support. So, we heard a couple ambassadors yesterday say, well, I don't want to have to write all this stuff up. And you don't necessarily have to do it all alone. You just got to give the idea and work on it and be willing to stand up on stage and speak to it. So don't let them hold you back.
I mean, you have to create it, but
Right.
we'll help you.
Yeah, you'll pretty it up. You'll make it, you know what I mean? Like if they're worried about graphics and things like that.
Yeah, that you don't have to worry
Great
about.
graphics person, that's all I'm saying is
Yeah.
don't
We
get
got
caught.
graphics, Yep.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I want to keep everyone moving to their next meeting. So we'll see you next month. We might have to move it because it's conflicting with the summit, but we'll get there. We'll change it. So just RSVP. Thanks.
Hey everyone, thank you so very much for watching. Your support in this community means a lot to all of us. Please check out more of the Women in FinOps stories from our community. You can also support this channel by liking it, subscribing to it, and of course leaving questions and comments below. Keep amplifying those women's voices. It's so important, and thank you so very much.